One artist who brought millions of Americans to tears over the radio ended up burning to death in a boat accident. Another fell on stage in front of hundreds of people, but the cameras stopped, and he never got up again. A lyricist forced to perform amid depression fell off a hotel balcony after a sleepless night. The media called it an accident, but to those involved, it was a mystery that had never been made public. Think you've heard enough sad stories about the music industry? These 23 deaths are not simple if you still think fame can protect a person. Watch this video until the end. 21. Sam Cooke, the angel in the bloody suit. In an era when a black man was not allowed to enter a luxury hotel, Sam Cooke could bring an entire audience to their feet with just one line of song. But that same man was found. One winter night in 1964, naked and bloody, on the floor of a rundown motel in South Central Los Angeles. Sam Cooke was more than just the father of modern soul. He was the voice of the civil rights movement. His song, "A Change Is Gonna Come," brought America to tears. But behind the scenes, he faced financial control from white record labels, threats from racists, and pressure from the FBI when he repeatedly donated money to activists. On the night of December 11, 1964, Sam went with a white woman named Elisa Boyer to the Hacienda Motel. Minutes later, she disappeared, along with his wallet and jacket. Sam, in a panic, threw open the door of the motel manager's office in his suit jacket and asked for her whereabouts. But instead of helping, the manager, a middle-aged black woman, pulled out a gun and shot him in the chest. The police concluded that it was justified. No one was charged. Elisa Boyer was not questioned further. The media portrayed Sam as a drug and sex-crazed man who brought disaster upon himself. But his friends told a different story. One band member said that Sam had planned to declare his independence from RCA and said at dinner, "They won't let me live." A security guard once saw the man following Sam around for several nights, but no one investigated. More than half a century later, no one knows exactly what happened in that room. Sam Cooke never got a fair trial, not even in his death. A voice for freedom, for love, for color, died in disgrace. And "A Change Is Gonna Come" remains to this day his saddest prophecy. If there is one thing that will keep him alive, it is the memory that will never fade in the hearts of those who cried because of his singing. 20. Jesse Belvin, the one who sings the last song and goes away. Jesse Belvin was once called by the press the second Nat King Cole. A young, handsome, charming talent with a velvet voice and a golden future ahead of him. But he died right after his first performance for a white crowd in Arkansas. It was 1960. Racism was still written all over restaurant signs and theater seats, but Jesse, with his wife and band, dared to participate in the first race reconciliation show in Little Rock. The media praised it, and the audience sang along. But backstage, things were different. Know when to back out. "Kid," the local police warned Jesse just before the show. Someone cut the piano wires, tampered with the microphones, and pulled the circuit breaker. The show went on after a temporary resumption. A few hours later, Jesse got in a car with his wife and manager to return to their hotel. It was a long, dark road with little traffic. At 1 a.m., their car was involved in a horrific accident. It was hit hard from behind and crashed into a tree. Jesse died instantly. His wife, Joanne, died shortly afterward. The manager was seriously injured but survived, and he refused to be interviewed afterward. The police ruled it a sleep-related accident, but no one could explain why Jesse's car's brakes failed before the crash. A fan who was at the scene said, "I heard another car revving up behind me and then the explosion." But that account was never included in the official record. Jesse died at 27, the same age as other legends like Jimi Hendrix or Janis Joplin, but his death was forgotten in a deliberate silence. A loving voice, a husband, a father about to release his second album, all because he dared to sing in a forbidden land. 19. Otis Redding, the man who never saw the sun tomorrow. Just hours before his death, Otis Redding recorded "Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay," a song that would become legendary. But he never heard the finished mix, less than 24 hours later. He died in a plane crash in Lake Monona, Wisconsin. Otis was 26 years old, at the height of his fame, Try a Little Tenderness. These Arms of Mine hits that put him at the top of the soul charts. He also planned to start his record label, empowering young black artists without white intermediaries. On December 10, 1967, Otis and his band boarded a private Beechcraft for a gig in Madison. It was snowing lightly. They had delayed the previous flight because of engine trouble. But this time, pressed for time, they flew. The plane crashed into a frozen lake after losing contact a few minutes before landing. 6 people died. Only one band member survived, Ben Cawley, who was still clutching his trumpet. Otis was sitting next to me, Ben recalled, as the plane shook. He turned to me and said, "Hold on, don't let go." That was the last thing I heard. Investigators said the plane lost altitude because the propellers froze, but the music world didn't believe it was a mechanical failure. Otis had just refused to renew his contract with Atlantic. He owned his copyrights, a rarity at the time. Years later, rumors circulated someone had heard a small explosion before the crash. Someone had warned him not to mess with the system, but no one investigated further. Otis died before the final product was heard, but the song topped the Billboard charts, becoming the first posthumous soul song to do so. Call it fate or the price of freedom. But for those who heard his voice, his death will forever be an open wound in black music. 18. Curtis Mayfield, the eternal singer who was suppressed by the light. Curtis Mayfield was the epitome of a great R&B artist, distinguished not only by his musical talent but also by his deeply social songs. He was the creator of hits like Move On Up and Superfly, which inspired millions. But Curtis's life was not all about the spotlight. Despite his success with his aspirational tunes, Curtis still faced terrible pressures, from racism to constantly battling the feeling of not being recognized enough. But no one expected that Curtis's life would end in a tragedy. On August 13, 1990, during a performance at the State Fair Coliseum in Brooklyn, New York, a stage light suddenly fell on him. Curtis was severely injured, damaged his spinal cord, and spent the rest of his life in a wheelchair. Doctors said he could recover, but the price was the permanent loss of mobility. After the accident, Curtis could only move around by leaning on a wheelchair. He continued to write songs, but the songs were no longer as bright as before. Instead, they were filled with sadness and despair. Although Curtis fought the disease for the next 9 years, he eventually died in 1999 from complications of the accident. What remains are beautiful songs, but also the story of a great torch being extinguished. His legacy is not just his music, but a model of strength, perseverance, and the desire to rise above adversity. However, the big question remains, was what he endured worth what he achieved? Curtis Mayfield lives on in music. But his tragic death makes us reflect on what was lost in the making of a legend. 17. Marvin Gaye, the sad song, who couldn't find happiness in the end. Marvin Gaye, one of the greatest voices in R&B history, is an icon of charm and talent. Songs like Let's Get It On and Sexual Healing have made him one of the greatest black artists of all time. However, behind those sweet lyrics is a life full of suffering, a soul that is always torn between career and personal sadness. Marvin Gaye was not only a victim of racism, but also a man haunted by painful family relationships. He grew up in an unhappy family with an alcoholic and even abusive father. This deeply affected his psychology, creating an indelible feeling of insecurity in his heart. On April 1, 1984, after months of struggling with mental health and family issues, Marvin Gaye was shot and killed by his father, Marvin Gaye Sr., in the family home in Los Angeles, the day before his birthday. Death came as an unimaginable shock. Marvin Gaye's death was a tragic end to a life that had been torn apart by emotional undercurrents. Many people cannot understand why a father would kill his son, and Marvin Gaye may have lived a life that was never truly happy. Questions about injustice and mental anguish remain unanswered. However, his legacy will forever live on in his music, with songs that can soothe the most broken heart. Marvin Gaye is gone too soon, but his music will never be forgotten. 16. Jackie Wilson, the man who sings and falls into a coma from the stage. Jackie Wilson, Mr. Excitement, is one of the great legends of R&B music, an artist who can light up the whole stage with just a wave of his hand or a smile. Wilson is not just a singer, but a musical phenomenon. Hits like Lonely Teardrops and Reet Petite have captivated generations of audiences. But when the stage lights go down, Jackie Wilson faces a life full of challenges and suffering. In 1975, during a performance at Dick Clark's The Big Show, while singing on stage, Jackie suddenly collapsed. He suffered a massive heart attack and fell into a deep coma. Wilson could not continue performing. The next few minutes were a lingering pain that cannot be described in words. From then on, Jackie Wilson lived out the rest of his life in a coma. He never woke up to see the revival of the music he had dedicated his life to. For 9 years in a coma, Jackie Wilson lived under the care of his family and friends. His final years were filled with pain, as the world still remembered him as an icon. His death was not only the end of a music star, but also a lesson in the fragility of life. Jackie Wilson's story reminds us that not everyone can shine forever. Regardless, his music continues to live on in the hearts of those who loved him. But the big question remains, if his life had not ended like that, would his musical legacy have been even greater? 15. Johnny Ace, the man who bets on a bullet of destiny. Johnny Ace was not a long-standing star, but in a short time, he had audiences across the American South stunned by his sweet, haunting voice. The hit Pledging My Love played on the radio continuously for many months in early 1955, but ironically, when the song was released, Johnny died. His death took place backstage at a music hall in Houston, Texas, just hours before the show, the official reason playing Russian roulette with a revolver. But the strange thing is, no one witnessed the whole thing, and no one can answer why would a star at the top suddenly gamble with his life like that. Johnny Ace had served in the Navy, but after being discharged, he quickly rose to fame with the Beale Streeters. Despite his shy appearance, Johnny was a gun enthusiast, often carrying a pistol with him. It is said that he often held the gun out to joke around, but only to scare others. However, on the night of December 25, 1954, no one expected him to point the gun at himself and pull the trigger. Singer Big Mama Thornton was present at the scene. She said that Johnny had been drinking at the time, excited after being cheered enthusiastically by the audience. He took out the gun to play with, said, "It doesn't have any bullets," then laughed and pulled the trigger, but the bullet went off. Johnny fell into a chair, dead on the spot. Everyone around thought it was a joke until blood started pouring from his head. The police ruled accidental suicide. There was no further investigation. But the rumors didn't stop. Some backstage workers whispered about conflicts between Johnny and his management over the division of profits. Some said he had begun talking about leaving his white label and going independent. One manager threatened that he wouldn't live long enough to regret it. But no one investigated. No one asked where the gun came from. The song Pledging My Love, released a few weeks later, became a farewell love song for the artist who hadn't yet turned 25. It was played at weddings, then funerals, like a promise forever unfulfilled. Johnny Ace's death was one of R&B's first great tragedies, and to this day, no one knows if it was a prank gone wrong or a warning smothered by gunshots. 14. Harold Melvin, the leader forever in the shadows. Harold Melvin was not the lead singer, but he was the soul, the founder of Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, an icon of Philadelphia soul. Under his leadership, the group produced songs like If You Don't Know Me By Now and Wake Up Everybody. However, when the stage lights went down, people learned that Harold had spent the last years of his life with a weak body, a broken voice, and secrets buried forever. After a serious car accident in the early 90s, Harold began to show signs of rapid decline. Relatives said he often suffered from temporary memory loss, had severe pain for no apparent reason, and sometimes woke up not knowing where he was. The accident was not widely publicized, but it kept Harold out of the spotlight for years, until his death in 1997 spread like a cold mist. Close friends have said that the accident was not simply driver error. Before the crash, Harold had received an anonymous letter threatening that if you ever try to reclaim the song, you will regret it. At the time, Harold was suing his former record label for a series of recordings from the 1970s. The lawsuit was dismissed shortly after the accident. Harold was no longer mentally fit to stand trial. He lived out his final years in silence, No newspapers, no television, just old tapes and the voices of others singing the songs he had written when he died. His funeral was quiet, no ceremony, no tribute. He was known only as the man behind Teddy Pendergrass. But the truth is, without Harold Melvin, there would be no Blue Notes, and without the songs he helped create, Philadelphia Soul would never have been Philadelphia Soul. He left like a shadow, and maybe that's what some people wanted all along. 13. James Carr, the man who sings love songs in the mist. James Carr was one of the most haunting soul singers of the 60s, a man who sang as if his heart was breaking with every note. The Dark End of the Street, a love song about a hidden relationship, became a manifesto for lonely souls. But perhaps few people know that James Carr himself lived in the dark, a darkness that no one could see, but always existed in his mind. James was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at a very young age. When he performed, audiences were amazed by his powerful voice, but just a few hours later, he could be smashing hotel rooms, sobbing over something no one understood. He often missed shows, disappeared, and then appeared in a state of lethargy as if his soul had been stolen. In the late 1970s, after a serious car accident in Mississippi, James Carr almost completely disappeared. The car flipped several times, but he miraculously survived. However, relatives said that after the accident, James was no longer himself. He became quiet, often stared into space, and often repeated a single sentence. "They tried to kill me." No one knows who they were. There is a theory that James knew too much about the fraudulent music contract that the record company forced him to sign when he was young. Some say he argued with the producer and threatened to go on TV and tell it all. The accident happened just a week after that argument. James Carr died in 2001 after years of poverty, neglect, and near oblivion. But the music he left behind, so sad that words can't describe it, still tugs at the heartstrings. Perhaps James Carr exemplifies an unanswerable question: what happens when a genius is trapped in a world where no one wants to listen? 12. Willie Mae Big Mama Thornton, the forgotten queen of the dark. She was the thunder of the blues, the first woman to sing Hound Dog with a voice like summer thunder, before Elvis Presley made it famous. But Willie Mae Big Mama Thornton never got the glory she deserved. Behind the strong exterior was a life riddled with wounds, both physical and mental. In her later years, people began to see her performing with one arm wrapped in a white bandage. A traffic accident left her with no feeling in her legs, but she still stood and sang with her guitar hanging from her chest. She refused to rest. One day in July 1984, people found her lying unconscious on the floor. The apartment was a mess, and the food was unopened. She died of complications from liver, kidney, and spinal injuries. But what was more painful was that no one knew how lonely she had been during her final years. No manager, no relatives, no public tribute. Neighbors say she stared out the window the night before she died, waiting for someone who never came. Big Mama Thornton lived an unanswered scream. Her legacy is an unfinished song about musical justice and a generation of black women who were not respected in the industry she created. Remember her, not for the way she died, but for the power she left behind in her roar. If you're still here after listening to these 10 most heartbreaking stories of black R&B legends, it means your heart has never closed over the unspoken loss. But the journey isn't over. The next deaths are even more haunting. And what if some of those deaths weren't so much accidents? 11. Lamont Washington, the man who fell from the Broadway clouds. He was once called the new light of Broadway. Lamont Washington, the successor to Sammy Davis Jr. in the lead role of the musical Golden Boy, was considered a rising star in black entertainment in the 1960s. But behind the scenes, Lamont lived a lonely life. No scandals, no marriages, no public appearances from relatives. People said he was a perfectionist, locking himself in his room for hours to practice a scene. Then one day in the early spring of 1971, Lamont was found dead after falling from the window of his high-rise Manhattan apartment. The police said it was an accident. There were no signs of a struggle, but neighbors said they heard screaming the night before. Friends said Lamont was torn between coming out and giving up the role that had made him famous. A former manager said Lamont had said, "I want to be myself, but it might kill me." The death of Lamont Washington ended a budding talent too soon. No one investigated, no newspaper ran a front page, but to black theater lovers, he remains the man who reached the top and perhaps was swallowed by it. 10. Barbara Randolph. The Motown muse quietly leaves her last performance. Barbara Randolph is not a name that everyone remembers, but those who have seen her perform say she was a shining light, a rare Motown singer and actress. She replaced Tammy Terrell in Marvin Gaye's band, but never really had a chance to shine. She had classic beauty and a gentle voice, but was stuck in a tangle of contracts and supporting roles. After marrying Eddie Singleton, Diana Ross's former manager, Barbara turned to charity work and settled in Europe. That's when the tragedy began. In 2002, while in the Netherlands preparing for a fundraising concert, Barbara was seriously injured in a car accident. There were no cameras, no clear witnesses. She died at the scene. Police ruled it accidental, but friends said that day. Barbara was worried about an anonymous letter threatening not to bring up the past with Motown. They said no more, and the media remained silent. Barbara Randolph left this world as she had lived it, gentle, quiet, and forgotten. But for those who believed in justice in music, her death still left a lasting mark. No one should die like that, especially an artist who used his voice to soften the hearts of millions. 9. Donnie Hathaway, a genius who fell from his soul. Donnie Hathaway was once considered a modern-day Black Mozart. His voice, both warm and broken, softened even the coldest souls. But everyone knew that geniuses were often lonely. Donnie lived with severe paranoia, often saying that someone wanted to kill him and that the equipment in the recording studio was monitoring his thoughts. Those words were initially considered delusions, but later, they became big question marks. On January 13, 1979, after recording with Roberta Flack, Donnie returned to the Essex House Hotel in New York. The receptionist said he looked distraught. A friend called and heard him say, "They're back. I can't hide anymore." Hours later, Donnie fell from a 15th-floor window. The police ruled it a suicide, but no one saw him open the door. No notes, no suicide note, and the window was hard to open. Friends said Donnie was in better shape. He had a new song and was about to reunite with Roberta Flack on tour. Why did he end it all, one night, so quietly? Donnie's legacy is music that makes listeners cry silently. But his passing was a deep fall that, to this day, no one dares to name. Perhaps the greatest pain is not death, but living in a world that does not understand the voice inside you. 8. Otis Blackwell, the man who made hits and died silently. Otis Blackwell was not a famous singer, but if you've ever heard Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, or Little Richard, you've heard Otis. He was the man behind immortal songs like Don't Be Cruel, Great Balls of Fire, and All Shook Up. But Otis remained largely anonymous throughout his life. His hits enriched others. He himself remained in the shadows. In 2002, Otis fell in the bathroom. No one knew until a maid found him a few hours later. The fall left him with a spinal injury, lung complications, and just a few weeks later, he breathed his last. His death was barely reported. There was no memorial service. No one sang his songs at his funeral. What made his family most bitter was that a few months earlier, Otis had said in a rare interview, "I feel like I'm going to die before I get recognized." A producer said that Otis was rejected for the Hall of Fame because he wasn't popular enough. So how many songs did he have to sing to be recognized? Otis Blackwell didn't need the spotlight to shine. He was the light behind it all. And perhaps the most unfair thing is that the world didn't know that until he fell alone. 7. Billy Stewart, the musical storm that broke down the river. Billy Stewart didn't sing. He threw each word like a mesmerizing, chaotic dance. With his unique staccato voice, Billy created classic covers like Summertime and his own songs that caught Motown's attention. But his life and his singing was always in a race against something, and it ended in a way no one could have imagined. On January 17, 1970, Billy drove a Ford Thunderbird with 3 band members across a bridge on the Neuse River in North Carolina. It was a fateful trip to a gig. The car reportedly lost control, went off the bridge, and sank. All were killed. But some details raised suspicions. Police said the car had a stuck accelerator, but the car had been inspected only a week earlier. A friend on the tour said Billy had complained about an unusual screeching noise in the tires, and that he felt someone wanted him to take a break from singing. The day before the accident, Billy left a voicemail message for his mother. "If I don't make it, know that I'm still trying to do the right thing." The public was devastated. A 32-year-old talent disappeared because of a car accident. But who really knows what happened on that bridge? Billy Stewart died in the middle of writing a new love song. But those who heard him sing will never forget the feeling as if his own heart was screaming in each chorus. And that heart stopped beating in the cold water, carrying with it an unspoken message. 6. Florence Ballard, the uncrowned queen of Motown. Florence Ballard was once the brightest heart of the Supremes' co-founder, lead singer in the early days, the one who was called the real voice by the whole of Detroit. But then, when the spotlight was on Diana Ross, Florence was kicked out of the group, lost her contract, lost her reputation. She drank, was trapped in miserable marriages, and then a car accident weakened her body. People saw her applying for welfare, standing in line to receive relief food. A diva, once an icon of Motown, died quietly of a heart attack at the age of 32 before the doctor could reach her. A few days before, she had told a neighbor, "I feel like something is pulling me down." Many believe she died not of illness, but of a heart that had been rejected too many times. Florence is a painful lesson that talent is not always protected, and music history owes her an apology. 5. David Ruffin, the man with the voice of God and the loneliness of the devil. David Ruffin didn't have to try to become a legend. He was the soul of the Temptations, the man who brought My Girl and made America fall in love with black singing again. But fame came early and retreated just as quickly. David was kicked out of the group, addicted and unstable. On June 1, 1991, he was found collapsed in a friend's living room, dead of a drug overdose. But what's suspicious is that the friend didn't call an ambulance immediately. David's wallet was missing. Medical records were conflicting. Some said he had a big argument over royalties the day before. David once said in a late-life interview, "I have a voice they can't recreate, and so I'm a threat." His death left people both sad and suspicious. David Ruffin is proof that a great voice can't stop loneliness from killing people silently. 4. Rudy Lewis, the angelic voice, disappeared before a fateful recording session. As the new soul of the Drifters, Rudy Lewis delivered some of the most lyrical songs, including On Broadway and Up on the Roof. But few knew that he struggled with depression and the secret of his sexuality in a world that was not yet ready to accept it. On May 20, 1964, Rudy was found dead in his Harlem apartment, just hours before the recording session for his new song. Police said he died of a drug overdose. But a friend said that night, Rudy burst into tears and said, "I can't live a life of pretense anymore." Rumors spread that he wanted to come out and leave the group to start a solo career, and then he never woke up. The recording session went on, but with a different voice. Rudy Lewis, an artist who wanted to sing the truth, was muted before he could say a final word. 3. Tai Longley, the artist who died in the middle of a song. Tai Longley was the lead guitarist of the rock band Great White. But few people know that he was also a multi-talented artist with a background in R&B music. On the night of February 20, 2003, at a small bar in Rhode Island, the show started like any other, but just 30 seconds after the stage started, stage flares shot up into the ceiling, catching on flammable soundproofing material. Within 5 minutes, the entire building was engulfed in flames. Tai Longley did not escape. Witnesses said he went back to save a fan who fell. He never came out. The fire claimed 100 lives. The question remains, why was such a small place allowed to use flares? And why was no one held accountable? Tai Longley died as a silent hero in the smoke and fire, with his music still playing unfinished. 2. Aaliyah, the queen who lived only to the first chapter. Aaliyah was a new icon of R&B when she was only 22 years old. With her natural beauty, smooth voice, and cinematic performance, she was called the future queen of American music. On August 25, 2001, after finishing filming the video for Rock the Boat in the Bahamas, she and her crew boarded a small plane to return home. Minutes after takeoff, the plane crashed and exploded. Everyone died. The investigation concluded that the plane was overloaded, the pilot was not licensed, and there were drugs in his blood. Why was a big star like Aaliyah put on such an unsafe flight? Who made the final decision? Her death was not only a great loss, but also a heartbreaking reminder that the smallest carelessness can kill a brilliant future. 1. Johnny Moore, the man who left the stage silently. Johnny Moore was a mainstay of the Drifters, keeping the singing flame alive for decades. He was the man behind hits like Under the Boardwalk and Saturday Night at the Movies. But as Motown rose, his name was gradually forgotten. In 1998, while on tour in Jamaica, Johnny Moore was in a serious traffic accident. The car crashed into bushes on the side of the road while he was sleeping in the back seat. He was rushed to the emergency room but did not survive. News of his death only appeared briefly in the local newspaper. No one investigated the cause thoroughly. There was no public funeral. He passed away in a painful silence that should not have been reserved for someone who sang for millions of people across generations. Johnny Moore is a voice that should never have disappeared into silence. We cannot change the past, but we can keep those souls respected with understanding and gratitude. Every artist who has passed away in tragedy has brought hope and light through music. Let us remember them not only for how they died, but for how they lived with their voices, their hearts, and their courage. Your presence here speaks volumes more than words can express. Thank you for being there until the end. If you feel these artists deserve more mention, please share this video. A like, a comment, can be a bridge to keep beautiful memories alive in an era of many forgotten things.